Hey guys, we'll talk about MINM. This was very interesting. I was actually very bullish this name. Um, I was actually looking for the long. There were painted lower highs from the day before. If you remember yesterday, it made a big move, and we've been seeing that multi-day runners can be really strong, right? And low floats, multi-day runners are really dangerous because you never quite know where support's going to be, and you never quite know how high, these riggers are going to take it, right? So I found that a lot in most situations that shorting a lot of multi-day runners, I've had a lot of success sometimes, and then I would have huge losses other times. And unless you have an amazing thesis of why that trade might work, um, on a multi-day, on a multi-day rig, usually it's very difficult, right? So I got online when it was down here, and I actually thought it would show weakness in the market open, and then I thought they would use the market open volume to push it. But they decided to push it right away, and I'm like, oh man, look how strong this is. So I didn't even have shares. I'm like, oh man, this is like some really strong multi-day runner type of rig. I don't want to exactly reserve shares, especially because this was 1 minute 9, 1 minute 20 straight up, and I'm like, you know what? Um, I'm just gonna kind of avoid this one for now. Maybe focus on some other place. I was looking at NRBO and some other place. I'm like, which is funny because I was actually longing at NRBO. We'll go over that. I'll talk about that a little later. But I actually really wasn't interested until this area, right? So I didn't have any shares. I wasn't really looking. I thought this would be strong, so I wasn't looking to short up here. I wasn't looking to catch the top up here, in any way. But we had we had a pattern that I feel like in 2020 and 2021 was super common. I made that anticipating clearouts video where you would get these super painted levels. Sorry, I messed that up. These like in this case 6.5 like super painted. Like you're talking look how many bounces like one bounce, two, three, four, five, six, you get all these pushes to the same level. And of course they push through it and they pull it, right? Classic low float action, especially on a stock that's already like massively squeezed multiple times. A lot of bearish factors adding up on this. And by the way, if you're wondering how I shorted this, when it's this painted, when it broke 6.5, I read the tape. When it breaks 6.5 on the ask, I just market order. And then if it doesn't immediately work, I usually just I've had plays like this where it didn't work, and I've gotten out within 5 seconds, 3 seconds, like really, really quick. Um, but I've been studying a recent little Bookmap trick on these backside clearouts that have been it's really interesting. It's something that took me months to realize, like, oh, like I keep getting, because I was getting stopped down on some of these plays uh, initially, and I'm like, oh, wait, like this same, that's usually how I learn new things. Like, I keep taking losses when the same thing keeps happening, and then I just notice the pattern and I try to change my behavior, right? So, yeah, I just insta shorted above 6.5. Because the idea is like, if I think 6.5 is painted and they're going to pull it, then I'm going to want my average to be as good as possible. And, in low floats, they can pull things so quickly, right? That, like, I'm really just reading the ask and getting in. Um, just betting that this is a fake breakout, right? If your bet is this is a fake breakout, then you're going to want to get in as close at the top as you can, right? So, funny enough, I actually thought they might squeeze me here, but I did have my stop loss higher and I didn't get squeezed. Um, and then I actually took a really long nap, and then I woke up, and funny enough, the price was pretty much where I covered. So that's always nice. But we'll go over kind of like the book tricks. We'll go over the chart. Um, we'll go over let's instead of focusing on the book, we'll focus on TOS. Right. So here's that move. Yes, I was out yesterday, so that's why I didn't make a video. I didn't trade this. Um, but here's that pre-market push, right? So here's that pre-market push. And some people in my Discord room, information up below, but are like shorted this pre-market push, which is not a bad idea because the idea here is it's squeezing all these backside levels, right? There's a bunch of empty space it's filling. You do an aggressive move that squeezes all the backside people, and you pull it, right? Now I wasn't on here. I wasn't on for that, but I probably would have been really tempted to do the same thing. Um, but you know, every time you take a short, you always have to ask yourself, like, even if the short is working, like, what's the bullish thesis, of the play? And the bullish thesis here is we got this lower high pain. We talked about this, right? This lower high. Here's high day, lower high, lower high. So I got a lower. That's always going to be bullish in low floats, right? When you paint resistance, paint lower highs right below high day. Doesn't mean it's always going to squeeze, but that doesn't mean you have to full cover, your play, up 5 or 10% or something. But it's just something you have to keep in mind, right? Like, okay, like if this play's not going to work, it's going to attack these lower highs, right? And ideally, you're shorting up here, right? Which um, people in my room were doing. They had averages, at or above 5. Um, and then they got out when this rotated like this, right? Um, so yeah, like I said, I was actually hoping this would go sideways into the open and then push, but they just used the pre-market liquidity to squeeze it. And I'm like, oh man, multi-day runner, really strong. Let me avoid it. And then it really wasn't until the 6.5 paint that it became interesting. Now I wasn't expecting 6.5 initially. Whenever I see down only like this, so we have a big, big dump, down halted, it's under VWAP. I'm not in the play over here. I'd even have shares at this point, and I wasn't even in the play. And I sit in my room. I was like, I'm really not interested unless this pushes really aggressively back to 7, because 7 is a nice whole dollar level. You get some lower highs. That way, that also the stock gets closer to high day. I like aggressive moves the closer they get to high day. Um, so that's why I was hoping on like this push or this push. I was hoping one of these pushes here would get back up to 7 and I could make a read, right? But then it kept hitting 6.5, and I'm like, all right, it hits, and then it hits 6.5 again, and then this is when became really interested in the play, because I'm like, wow, this is straight out of 2021 here. These like crazy painted levels, these fake breakout levels, especially on a stock that, already squeezed multiple times, getting quite extended. I really wasn't interested until how heavily painted this level was. And then, yeah, it broke 6.5, and then I just insta shorted it when I saw the ass break 6.5. So we'll go over the book. I want to talk about a book trick that I've been seeing over and over again, and we'll go over NRBO really quickly because they did the same trick, even though NRBO is a slightly different situation. Um, but it's the same idea where you can see the 6.5 paint, and a lot of times what I realize on these painted backside plays where there's where a stock already went parabolic, it pulled back. There's a bunch of lower highs. In this case, they're all at the same level, but sometimes they're not at the same level. Sometimes they're just kind of close to each other. And they do a big, sometime in the afternoon, they do a big backside swipe and pull, right? And what I notice what they do is they have a bunch of asks that are holding it down, right? So you can see the ask holding it down, see the ask holding it down. And then when they actually initiate the swipe, what they do, and the way it has the best odds in terms of a short, is there should be a lack of bid follow up, usually especially on the clear out move, but even leading up to the clear out move, right? We see these plays where the stock is really controlled, but there's not any real bids holding the stock up besides at maybe at lower levels, but really not on the aggressive moves towards the clear out level. And what they do is they stack a bunch of asks here, and they let these asks get filled on this push, so they're getting filled, right? So the market maker is probably stacking a bunch of these asks here, and then they're painting, they're building that backside liquidity, and they're letting their orders get filled on the backside. And since there's no bid follow up, they initiate the clear out, all their asks get filled, and then they pull it, right? Like big pull, right? Big pull. And if we go to NRBO, now I didn't take this one because at this point in, like, here. They did it here, right? Right here at 5.2, right? So you had this painted level 5.2, 5.2, 5.2, 5.2. The big difference here is the reason I did not want to take this short is the play is really bottomed out over here, right? High days at 6.75, the low is at 4, and this is like, 20, 25% up from the low, right? What's the fade expectancy on a play like this, right? Back to the 1 minute 200 maybe, so maybe like a dollar move or something. And then the risk in low floats is that, you have all this empty space up here where some rigging can happen. Um, that's why I was really hesitant to short something like this, just because the risk reward didn't just really make a whole lot of sense to me. Now there were people in my room who shorted up here in the 580s. This was actually really smart. I thought I was kind of waiting for 6 to get broken, and it didn't. And then it did this weird sideways thing, which, it's a low float stock. Stuff like this happens. You never know when it's going to happen. But going back to the book, we see the same thing where they have a bunch of asks stacked. And I had some people in my room short into these asks because they thought these asks would hold. And I don't blame them because, there's a lack of bids. There's a lot of asks here. It's an aggressive move. It's just the place so bottomed out that I really wasn't looking at it. Um, but they did a very similar trick, right? They fill up all these asks, no bid follow up, and then they pull it. Now this ended up being uh, my long time trading buddy Dan long this down here off these off these bounces. You could see them. This ends up being a perfect clear out short trap because of A, how bottomed out the play is, and B, how many bids they stack down here is actually kind of insane. I was actually kicking myself for not having the read on this, and I didn't want to chase. I saw this right here, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to chase. Even though this looks super strong, I don't want to chase this over here. But yeah, nice. But yeah, nice backside clear out, fills the ask, no bid follow up, and then they flip the script and they push it. But that's about that. And then yeah, funny enough, yeah, here's that little manipulated 6.5 move. But I had my risk up here, and then luckily it just did low float stuff and faded. So kind of a short video. I guess we could go over the pre-market. The pre-market action had, it had a lot of bid follow up. You could see the bid. So here's like the 1 minute 20 bids. It filled some of them, but these bids are right on the 1 minute 20 EMA, right? More follow up bids. Look at all the layers of follow up bids. You don't want to be, when there's this many layers of follow up bids, it's unsurprising why the market maker, um, uh, it's unsurprising why the stocks squeeze straight up like this. Because a lot of times in pre-market stocks, um, a bid follow-up is needed to continuously push a stock in a pre-market on these low flow pieces of crap, right? If we go to my NRBO long, I'll show you what I longed. I longed this in the pre-market, and I took a loss. Luckily my average was really good, but I took a loss on this. Um, it was we had the NRBO had the initial push, and you could oh, you can't see this. NRBO had the initial push, and you could see them stack a bunch. This was right on the 1 minute 20, right at $5. You could see them stack a bunch. Like it's selling into these bids, they're stacking it, selling into it, they're stacking. And I longed this right here. Um, I had like a 512 average or something, and then it started pushing and then pushed again. I was up almost 50 cents on it. But if we look at this, we zoom in, not a whole lot of bids following us up. This looks a lot different than MINM. If you go to MINM's pre-market, you could see, you know, bid follow up here, right? Look at these 4 layers of bid follow up, bid follow up. This is how you catch, 30, 40, 50% moves in the pre-market. Um, if you're already long, right? You're already long, and there's like multiple layers of bid follow up. It's great, It doesn't mean it's always going to push, but it's exactly what you want to see. But NRBO, There's a lot of times where I thought this was I thought they were going to squeeze early shorts. They're going to throw up a bunch of bids and squeeze them. But if there's no bid follow up, you always risk these knives. Like this went from 5.65 to 5.05 in like less than a minute, right? You never know when there's a lack of bid follow up and you're long on a low float stock, especially in a pre-market. You never know when they're just gonna knife it, which is why a lot of times if you're longing these, like you want your averages down here, right? Retail is the one chasing these moves at 5.5, right? 5.5 chase. You want your average to be 5.10. That way, if it knives, um, I did hold because there were a lot of bids right here. But once these bids got sold into, I just got out, and I didn't think about it. And then I actually thought maybe they might manipulate it up again, but you don't want to, like, in my opinion, like this move is the way higher odds move. And if they're gonna do long trappy stuff like this, I'm not gonna, I was gonna wait for market open and see what happened. But anyway, MINM, a very, I have not seen that painted of a backside clear out in a bit. We used to get a lot of them, but yeah, that's an interesting book map trick. So if you think a backside level's crazy painted, or some key levels crazy painted with like multiple layers of ask, you know, you're gonna have to make a judgment call of are those asks gonna hold and I'm gonna short now, or am I gonna wait for this type of move to happen where the asks get filled with no bid follow up and I'm gonna wait if I see this combination on a painted level, especially if a stock's already squeezed multiple times, I'm gonna take the short. So, anyways, that's MINM and a little bit of NRBO. That's all I traded today, and that'll be it. Information down below about the Discord. You guys have a good one. See ya.